I steered the small inflatable boat toward the shore. As I looked back at the horizon, I marveled at the beautiful pink, purple, and orange colors of the sunset. The white sand and black rocks contrasted on Makalovan Beach. There was no one on the beach, and I was glad of that. I wasn't expecting anyone after all, it was Thursday. That only made my mission easier. As the sun set, darkness would cover my landing and there would be nothing to worry about. I had bittersweet memories of this beautiful beach. Tomorrow, like a sunrise, my life would begin anew, and I would have no regrets. Many months before that, we could have been on one of those HGTV reality shows where a couple decides to move to a tropical region and goes through the process of evaluating several places to live. At the end of the show, they have a fruity drink with a real estate agent, celebrating the purchase of their new home. In our case, we weren't fleeing the snows of the Midwest, but the 9 months of gray skies of the Pacific Northwest. Hillary and I met in Seattle and have been married for 6 years. We were vacationing in Hawaii and decided that the Kona area on the Big Island was the best place to move. Seattle's gray skies were an important, but not the only reason to move. We were choosing between a house and a condo, and both options had their pros and cons. In the end, we settled on the condo. The lack of maintenance and the ability to make friends faster were the main reasons we chose a condo. Ali Drive is an oceanfront road running south from downtown Kona towards Keauheo Bay. It is dotted with houses and condos, and every morning runners, walkers, and bicyclists go up and down it, getting their daily dose of exercise. The condo we stayed at, the Kona Palms, was about a mile south of town and was one of the larger complexes. It had a large pool with a hot tub. In front of the pool was a covered outdoor seating area with a BBQ, and in the air-conditioned room was a very nice workout area with machines and free weights. Our room, 508, was in the front building overlooking the ocean. It also had 3 bedrooms, a nice master bedroom overlooking the ocean, a decent-sized guest room, and a small bedroom in the back overlooking the pool. This would be my office. The realtor said that 3-bedroom condos with an ocean view are rare, and we should count on it. She may have exaggerated the need for urgency, but we offered full price and got it. "Brian, I'm so excited," Hillary purred as we closed on the condo purchase. "I feel like our life is going to turn into a permanent vacation." "Brian, I love you. This was the right move for us," she exclaimed. "I'm glad you like it, and I do too. But as for a permanent vacation, I have a more than permanent job, and yes, you have a busy schedule." "We still have to maintain this new lifestyle," I said. "I know," Hillary said, "but let me just think about the vacation for now." I smiled at her and gave her a hug. This really was my dream, and I was glad that Hillary was happy here too. We were actually in pretty good shape. The house I sold in Kirkland allowed us to easily pay our rent and monthly installments. We had a decent amount of equity left after the purchase, and we also had my secret account, which Hillary didn't know about at the time. Hillary is an emergency room nurse, and because of her experience, she easily found a job at Kona County Hospital. She negotiated a shift schedule consisting of 3 10-hour day shifts. I'm a commodities broker. I can live anywhere. I worked in an office in downtown Seattle for the first 10 years. The knowledge I gained from the veterans in that office allows me to work remotely now. By the time we got the keys and moved in, we had spent about 8 weeks on the Big Island. We were getting used to a new way of life. I had to keep an eye on the markets and socialize with people on the mainland. I was usually up at 4 a.m. and working in my office by 5. Hillary worked Monday through Wednesday from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Thursday, she would rest and recuperate, and by Friday, she would go into vacation mode. I knew her job was challenging and stressful. When I could, I would leave early on Thursdays and Fridays, and we would start the weekend. We moved in on a Wednesday and, in the process, met a few new neighbors. Everyone seemed friendly, and the people were different. Older, younger, singles, couples, different ethnicities. We learned that the condo was hosting a Pau Hana night this Friday. Everyone would gather in the pool area around 6 p.m. There was food, sometimes music, and all at will. Apparently, it happened a couple times a month and was related to different events or themes. Everything was planned through the general manager of the condo. We entered the restaurant around 6:30 with a chilled bottle of white wine and a 6-pack of beer in an ice chest. We found a free table and sat down. We met a lot of people, and everyone seemed nice with varying degrees of friendliness. This place definitely had its heroes. One of the first people we met were Clarence and Lynn. They are a gay couple who moved from San Francisco. They live at the Palms full-time. Clarence is a large, older black man who taught economics at the University of California at Berkeley. Lynn was a stockbroker who retired in his early 50s. I got the impression that money was not a problem for them. Then we met Bob and Ramona Platt. They were in their 50s, originally from Texas, and had lived here for a short time. Bob was a builder and made his money developing land in and around Houston. Both were a little overweight, dressed in bright-colored shirts, good-natured, and seemed to like whiskey. I like everything about Hawaii, but I can't stand the colorful shirts. Another interesting couple was Banks Redmond and Chloe Davenport. They're married. We learned that Chloe works as a VP at a large bank in Southern California, and Banks is a psychologist by training but also considers himself a real estate developer investor. Chloe seems to be shuttling back and forth between Hawaii and Los Angeles. According to Banks, for now, he's working full-time at the Palms. I have a project I'm working on in Hilo. We can drive down there sometime and take a look if you want, Banks explained. Banks looked about 5 or 6 years older than me. He was in his late 30s or maybe 40s. Chloe looked a little older. She was a slender and attractive woman with a serious expression on her face. Blonde with fair skin. She looked rich, which, as we found out later, she was. Banks was swarthy, probably of Mediterranean descent. He was a few inches taller than me, about 6 feet 2 inches, very tanned and in good shape. He had a scruffy appearance, but so far he was a nice guy. I met a lot of other people at Pauhana, but I had a long conversation with Banks. He told me that he counseled people informally. He called himself a relationship specialist, whatever that means. He was interesting and had some charisma. He asked about my business and how we chose Kona as a place to live. While we were talking, I noticed that Hillary hadn't been at our table in a while and casually glanced over to see where she was. She was talking to a young, skinny surfer with a deep tan and curly blonde hair. He looked to be in his early 20s. They were laughing and standing quite close. Banks noticed me watching them. "That's Corey White," he told me. "He goes after women in Palms," Banks explained. "What?" I said. "Yeah, a young, good-looking guy like that pounces on female tourists and has a lot of fun," Banks continued. I stood up to intervene. I did a calming exercise. Deep inhale. Deep exhale. Deep inhale. Deep exhale. I looked back at Banks, and he had this look on his face like he was mentally analyzing the situation. "Hi, Hill," I announced, wrapping my arms around her waist and kissing her cheek. "Oh, Brian." I think I surprised her, and it took her a moment to calm down. "This is Corey. He's a marine biologist. He's been telling me about what lives in the ocean." "Brian Rivers," I said, extending my hand. "Nice to meet you," Corey replied. He grabbed my hand, and I squeezed it even tighter. The expression on his face changed from friendly to, "What the hell are you doing?" Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Hillary went on and on about what an interesting man he was, how he suggested we take a ride on his boat to see dolphins and sharks, and so on. I just stood there with a silly smile on my face and nodded. "See ya," I said, and directed Hillary back to our table. When I looked back, White threw me a perplexed look. We walked back to our table, and Hillary started talking to Chloe and Ramona. I just watched the events unfold. My attention never strayed away from White. "Don't worry, he never goes after married people," I heard a deep, ringing baritone. It was Clarence. "Excuse me?" I asked. "I saw you observing young Mr. White," Clarence said. "A pleasant man, and there's nothing wrong in watching him. But I wouldn't worry about him and married women." I don't worry about anything like that," I stammered. I was a little embarrassed that Clarence had noticed my jealousy. "Same thing, my boy, rest assured. Corey is a heterosexual young man with red blood, but he has his own set of rules. Married women are definitely off-limits to him. He and I have had many ethical discussions." "Thank you for the information, but I assure you it doesn't bother me," I replied. "Good, good. All good relationships are built on trust, Mr. Rivers," Clarence stated, and withdrew, giving me a friendly pat on the shoulder. Sitting at my desk, I thought about Clarence's words. It was almost exactly a year ago. We had been invited to a party by one of Hillary's coworkers when we lived in Kirkland, just outside of Seattle. These parties can be fun, but sometimes they boil down to hospital gossip and complaints about work, which can get boring for an outsider like me. Hillary was excited and looked great. She's in her early 30s, 3 years younger than me. She has thick, shoulder-length dark blonde hair. She has a sloping body. I think it was her open smile and beautiful eyes that initially caught my attention. Truth be told, when I first saw her, I was only interested in getting her into my bed. But then I got to know her better. That story can wait. But it can't be helped. She does give off a sexual energy. I'm used to her attracting male and sometimes female attention. I'm just trying to stay calm. Deep breaths, deep breaths. Anyway, we get to a party at the house of one of Carly's friends and coworkers. It's the usual crowd. I know about a third of the group by name, and another third I've seen at some similar events before. As we walked in, I saw an old high school football teammate, John Washington. He's hard to miss. John is huge and seems to have gotten even bigger since high school. We used to play football together at Mount Tahoma High School. I was a running back, and John played on the offensive line. We weren't friends in high school, but we were friends. I was glad to see him. We ended up having a beer and talking and figuring things out. It turned out that his wife, Mandy, works as a midwife at Overlake Hospital, the same hospital where Hillary works. John and I and a few other people sat in one corner talking about sports, women, and the usual topics. About an hour and a half into the party, the atmosphere changed a bit. A few guys from the group I was with looked toward the door, the conversations quieted down for a minute, and then there were loud cheers about something. I looked around, and then a tall, dark-haired guy walked into the party. I'm straight, of course, but I have to admit that the guy was good-looking. As I watch him walk in, I look across the room at Hillary. She looks at the guy, and then I see Carly and another friend looking at Hillary. Carly whispers something, and then they all giggle. What was that? My antenna is up, but I remain calm. A few of the guys I'm chatting with start talking about him, and I find out his name is Greg Gorsuch. Turns out he's been working in Boston for the last 4 or 5 years, and now he's back in Seattle. He's some kind of cool doctor. I look over and see Hillary hugging him tightly. When she starts to look in my direction, I find myself once again involved in the discussion my group has been having. I want to continue to secretly observe what is going on. Admittedly, I might start to get jealous, but I try to apply my calming techniques to stay calm. Throughout the evening, Dr. Gorsuch and Hillary don't take a step away from each other. At one point, I notice that they have separated themselves from the others and are sitting in a quiet corner. Now I can remain calm, but at this point I apologize and walk over to them. Putting my arm around Hillary's shoulders, I look up at him and introduce myself. Brian Rivers, I say and shake Gorsuch's hand. Greg Gorsuch, he replies with a charismatic smile. Greg, this is my husband Brian, Hillary says. You're married? He says with a slightly shocked expression on his face. Hillary doesn't usually wear a wedding ring because of her job in the emergency room. Yes, didn't I mention that? Hillary hisses. She looks alternately at me and Gorsuch. Gorsuch quickly takes her under his arm and says, Oh, maybe you did. Anyway, Brian, you have a beautiful bride. Congratulations to you both. Now I don't want to take up anyone's time. There are more people I need to meet, Gorsuch said. Quickly kissing Hillary on the cheek and squeezing my shoulder, he left. An awkward silence hung between me and Hill. So you know this guy? I asked Hillary. She looked at me with a tinge of guilt on her face. Yeah, he worked at the Swedes when I was there before we got married. And? I asked. He was part of a young group that sometimes hung out together. She said it with some awkwardness in her voice. Well, you definitely spent a lot of time with him tonight. Did you go on a date with him? I asked. No, not really. We were just friends. Let's just forget about it, she said. I know I haven't figured it all out yet, but I'm jealous, I admit it. But sometimes she gives me reason to be jealous. She's never done anything, but she flirts. And I know she had a bit of a wild past. I didn't know all the stories, but I heard some things. About 3 weeks after the party, I got an unexpected phone call from my old high school buddy, John Washington. John's office is next to mine in downtown Seattle, and he asked me to meet him for a beer at one of the downtown bars after work. Sure, John, I'd love to. I say that's a little weird. I like John, but we've never been close friends. When I ask him what's up, He just says we'll talk tonight. I met John at Pinecone, an upscale bar near Pioneer Square. We ordered beers and I asked what the deal was. Brian, it's none of my business, but you're my friend and I'm obligated to let you know what's going on, he said. Shall we get on with it? I was confused. What's going on? I was starting to get worried. Calm down and let me explain, John replied. A deep inhale. A deep exhale. Mandy works with your wife at Overlake. Remember that guy that all the girls were looking at Carly's party a few weeks ago? He asked. Who? I asked, but thought I already knew. You know, Mr. GQ from the soap opera who is fashionably late, he explained. Yeah, I know who you mean, Greg. What about him? I didn't like where this was going. I was starting to get angry, and John could sense it. Calm down, Brian. Let me get to the point. John calmly continued. Mandy said this guy is in Overlake right now. Apparently your wife has had dinner alone with him several times. Mandy says they always sit alone in the cafeteria, away from everyone else. So far, so good. Not too bad. And she says they look too cozy, and this guy has a reputation. What kind of reputation? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. I know his type, and tall, handsome, male-type ladies usually get any woman they want. Mandy also said she'd heard as if they'd had some sort of relationship in the past. What kind of relationship? I asked. Mandy didn't know. That's all she heard, John replied. Hillary and I talked about old boyfriends and my old girlfriends, but I'd never heard of Dr. Greg until that party. He's a player, John said. Mandy stays away from him. Did something happen to Hillary that she saw? I asked John. Mandy didn't think so, but on Thursday this week a group of them are going out after work. Your wife tried to get Mandy to go with her, but she refused. And when Mandy tried to say something to your wife about Mr. Wimpy Hound, your wife just laughed and said he was harmless. Look, you're my friend and teammate, and I'm only relaying what Mandy told me. But if I were you, I'd definitely see to it that all this cozy business stops. John exclaimed. He took a glass, and I told him that the beer was on me and that I was going to sit for a few minutes. We said goodbye and he wished me luck. My initial reaction was to go home and spend the night at her. But what to say? I'd heard that she'd had dinner with an old friend a few times. She would accuse me of jealousy and immaturity. Plan B was to see what would happen Thursday night. For the next few days, I was to keep a low profile and pretend nothing happened. On Wednesday after work, she told me about the meeting on Thursday. According to Hillary, a group of nurses were going out for drinks and possibly a bite to eat. She said I would be dining alone that night. I had a plan. I purposely didn't ask where they were going. Interestingly, she didn't offer that information either. Later that night, I texted John and asked him to ask Mandy to find out where the after-work party would be and that Mandy not inform Hillary of my request. He hummed approvingly and said he would text me the location tomorrow. Just after noon, I received a text from John. Belinda will be at Bellevue at 6 p.m. Thanks, I replied. During the day on Thursday, I had no calls or messages from Hill. After work, I went to my gym and worked out. I left the gym around 7 o'clock and got to Belinda's house at 7:30. I ordered takeaway food. Their food is actually quite good. The place looked busy and I saw Hillary's car in the parking lot. I walked in and told the waitress that I had an order. I was told to pay at the bar and that everything was almost ready. I noticed a group of people at a large table at the bar. As I slowly approached, I saw a few nurses I recognized, and in one corner sat Hillary and Dr. Greg. I couldn't tell if he was hugging her or just laying on the back of her chair. Either way, he was trying to occupy his territory. They seemed to be having a private conversation away from the rest of the group. I walked over and feigned surprise. Hillary! I exclaimed, and our eyes met. Brian, she almost shouted, what are you doing here? At that moment, several things happened. She recoiled from the doctor with a guilty look. He was furious that I had interrupted him, but then quickly put on a friendly and innocent look. He held out his hand for a handshake, but I ignored him. A few of the other nurses chuckled at the situation. Just looking for dinner, I said. Have a good time. At that point, I grabbed my food and left. As I pulled away, I saw the restaurant door open. Hillary saw me leave. By the time I got home, I was very hungry. While I ate, I turned on SportsCenter and had a beer. I wondered how long it would take Hillary to get home. If everything was innocent, she would continue her evening and get home closer to evening. If, on the other hand, she felt guilty, she would get home fairly quickly. The wait was not long. She walked in as if nothing had happened, but kept her eyes on me to gauge my mood. Gosh, you surprised me at Belinda's, she said. Why didn't you stay and visit me? She added, You looked like you were having a good time and I didn't want to bother you, I said with sarcastic innocence. Well, you could have at least said hi to the others, she said. Ha, the others, I said. I only noticed your long-lost doctor friend, I replied. And I think by this point she realized I was a little pissed off, but tried to make it her problem. There you go. There's that jealousy thing again. Greg is a friend of mine that I haven't seen in a while, and we were just chatting. Why do you always think every guy is trying to get in my pants? Other than at a party, I haven't seen him in years, and we were good friends when we were at Swedish Hospital. Oh, I see, I say. Other than at the party, you haven't had a chance to socialize with him at work, and that's what you did tonight, I ask. Exactly, she says. So you didn't get a chance to socialize at the hospital. I repeat. Brian, no. I'm busy at work, she states firmly, her voice getting a little louder. Okay, so no dinners together. And not just the two of us in the corner of the cafeteria a few times in the last 3 weeks. So, just so I understand completely, you haven't spent any one-on-one time with the guy they call a wuss? I ask with feigned innocence. Well, maybe, she replies meekly. Forget it, Hillary. You lied to me. You know it, and I know it. I tell her quietly, but firmly. What do you have to say for yourself? I ask. She looks away, and that's when the tears start. She knows it's my weakness, and I can sense that she wants me to hug her and tell her it's going to be okay. Absolutely not. Like I said, Hillary is somewhat of a coquette, but at least to my knowledge, she has never lied to me. This has caused a crack to form in my trust in her. When I ask her to explain again, she runs upstairs crying. I realize again that she wants me to come and comfort her, but it doesn't happen. When I go upstairs, I see that she is in the guest bedroom. With my job, I am up and out of the house early, long before she gets up. At work, I'm distracted but deciding some things in my life. With or without Hillary, I will leave the dreary weather of Washington State and move to Hawaii. Several people from my office have moved and are working remotely. One of my good buddies, Randy, who started working around the same time I did, lives in North Idaho, and he loves it. He asks me all the time why I still go to the office. Why don't I live where I want to live since the Seattle office has no advantages? I have always loved beaches, and Hawaii is my favorite island. The weather, the ocean, the beaches, the people. We vacationed there every year, and I decided the Kona area was my favorite. Although Hillary liked Hawaii too, she didn't want to move. That was the cause for concern. After lunch, I got busy looking for properties in the Kona area. I usually get home before Hillary, but when I got home Friday night, she was already there. This is going to be interesting, I thought. Hi, honey, she called out to me as I walked into the house. I've got salmon on the barbecue. Do you want a beer? I made my way into the kitchen, and she acted like Thursday never happened. I took the beer from her but didn't kiss her. I took the day off, the house needed to be cleaned, and I'd like to have dinner at home tonight. Sound good? She asked. I sat up and looked at her. What? She asked. I'm still waiting for an explanation after you lied to me yesterday, I stated. Brian, I didn't lie. I was just confused. I knew you were angry and I didn't want to upset you anymore. She tried to brush it off. So what do you want? Teriyaki sauce or dry salmon sauce? She asked. Salmon. I don't care about the damn salmon. I want to know why you lied to me, I said. I rarely use profanity, so she realized I was furious. What's the big deal? She objected. Greg was at the restaurant and we were talking. I'm allowed to have friends, or you're too insecure for that. She went on the offensive. I was starting to get angry. My therapist whispered in my ear. I mentally breathed deeply, breathing deeply. Here are the facts. You spent over an hour with this guy at Carly's one-on-one party, and he didn't know we were married. The subject never came up once during the entire conversation. Fact 2. You regularly have lunch alone with him in the cafeteria, and it causes gossip in the workplace. Fact 3. You socialize with him at Belinda's separately from the rest of the group. And finally, fact 4. You lied to me about seeing him, just catching up. By my calculations, you had at least 6 hours to meet him one-on-one. So what's the big deal? She just sat there looking down. Mentally, I prepared myself for the possibility that my marriage might fall apart and started thinking about starting fresh in Hawaii. I genuinely loved Hillary and loved everything we did together. But I couldn't stand the lies. I knew I was jealous, and if I didn't get the truth out of her, it would be over. She continued to remain silent. Finally, "I'm sorry, I've been unfair to you, but can I explain?" she said. I sat back and waited. As you know, my father left when I was 10 years old. I've always needed a man's approval. I know you know that. In school, I always picked the bad boy jocks. I had a certain reputation. When I graduated from nursing school, all those bad boy jocks were transplanted by doctors. Confident alpha males turned me on even then, I'll admit. I knew some of that, but not all of it. When I got a job at Swedish hospital after nursing school, there were a lot of young men there and we formed a sort of clique. Carly and some of the doctors were in it, including Greg. I dated a few, but nothing really stuck. It seemed like all they wanted was sex. I didn't know if I wanted to hear so many details. All the women were attracted to Greg and he was a bit of a player. I think I was attracted to him too. I started dating one of his friends, Nick Gardner, a radiologist. I soon realized it wasn't serious, but we continued dating for a few more months. I also learned that Nick and Greg were roommates and good friends. One night we were at a party, Nick and Greg was there too. I wasn't sure whose house it was. There was a lot of drinking going on, and apparently Nick talked me into going to one of the bedrooms upstairs. I had a few drinks too. This was definitely not entirely accurate, but I needed to hear how it ended. We were doing it in someone's room, and as we were just lying there, Greg came into the room. He said it was by mistake. He must have had a lot to drink too. He sat down on the bed and started talking to us. Nick said he had to go to the bathroom and would be right back. I expected Greg to leave, but he didn't. Well, I kind of fell in love with him and he started proposing to me. "Stop!" I yell. "You mean you had fun with him too?" I ask. For a full minute, she doesn't say a word. Finally, sort of. At this point, she cries, and I am furious. My wife is a whore? I don't know what to do. I guess the good news, if you can call it that, is that at least I learned the truth. No one would make this shit up. She then tells him that she feels awful the next morning. Nick asks if the three of them, her, him, and Greg, can get back together. She slaps him, and that's the end of their relationship. She learns from those around her that she is starting to get a bad reputation at the hospital. She quits partying and focuses on her career and the rest of her life. "Not long after that, I met you," she says. "You were dating his friend," I state firmly. "I know I was so stupid, but I was in love with him," she howls. "So you're still in love with him. Is that what this is about?" I ask. No, I love you." I was confused. Suddenly this guy I was once interested in was now interested in me. I would never do anything about it. It was just flattering. I tell her I need to think about it. We don't have dinner and I head out for a walk that ends up dragging on for hours. No wonder it's raining. A month ago, I was happy. Everything was going great. I had a wonderful woman as a wife, and I didn't give a damn about anything. Now I doubted my wife's morals and wasn't sure I trusted her. One thing I knew for sure was that I would definitely leave Puget Sound for Hawaii, with or without Hillary. In fact, I knew she was a little wild, even before we were married. But having fun with a guy and his roommate, that was pretty depraved. On the other hand, we weren't married and didn't even know each other at the time. I had a few casual sexual liaisons before we got married. When I finally made it home, I was confused about several things. One thing I was sure of: I was moving to Hawaii. The next few days were pretty stressful. I was still trying to figure out what to do about Hillary. I believed that she wasn't doing anything about Greg, but I believed she was getting too close to him. At one point on Saturday afternoon, I was ready to divorce her and move to Hawaii. A fresh start. On the other hand, I thought back to all the wonderful vacations Hillary and I had spent in Hawaii. The thought of being there without her wasn't as good as it was with her. We'd have to think about what to do. Obviously, we stayed together and moved in together. Hillary swore her love for me and denied any attraction to Greg. I wanted to believe her, and I kind of did. I had to keep an eye on her. Our life on Aaliyah Drive was wonderful. She worked 3 days a week and I had my own schedule. There were busy periods in my business, but there was also plenty of time I could miss when Heel wasn't working. My workload went up and down. It was like a permanent vacation. I ran Aaliyah Drive almost daily, and when Hillary was free, we hiked together. We explored the island and found beautiful waterfalls, jungles, majestic vistas, and amazing beaches. One of the things about the Big Island is that it is the newest island in the Hawaiian island chain. Therefore, there are fewer beaches here. The good beaches had to be reached by car, but they were worth it. Two of our favorite beaches were Kua Bay and Hapuna Beach, but we especially liked Makalawena Beach, M Beach. This Thursday, we decided to explore Beach M. At that point, we hadn't been there yet. Following the guidebook's directions, we turned onto the road leading to this beach. Across the road was a chain and a sign that read, "Closed for walking." From where we were staying, we could see the ocean and it seemed like it was only a mile or so away. We decided to walk along the lava rock to see it. It was definitely worth it. M Beach is beautiful. Fine white sand and blue-green ocean. It was spectacular. We walked up and down the beach and realized that there was no one else on the entire beach. Probably because everyone knew the road was closed on Thursdays. We picked a spot to sit in the sun and enjoy the beach. After a while, I felt like cooling off. I went for a swim, and when I came back, she suggested we have some fun. She just laughed and said, "Since there is no one else, why not?" I can't believe we just made love to my wife on the beach. We stayed on the beach for a few more hours and then headed back to the car. After we got home, Hillary went to take a shower. What a wonderful day. I felt like I had made the right choice in moving to Hawaii and the right choice in staying with Hillary. The next day, as I leave the training room, I spot Banks on the lawn, slowly and carefully performing a martial arts kata. He's wearing only shorts, sneakers, and a t-shirt. The guy is in good shape. His skin is a golden brown color. I remembered that he has an elegant appearance. Not like me, a little more stocky and muscular. As I was leaving, he called out to me, "Brian, how are you doing?" And we started talking and ended up planning dinner for Friday night. No pauhana this week. We grabbed a bite to eat at a place in town and on the way back stopped for a drink at Don the Beachcomber. Banks tells me about his development project near Pahoa on the Hilo side. He has a development plan for the site he purchased. He also talks about his counseling practice. He says his mission is to help couples build more fulfilling relationships. He says his clients usually don't pay, and that he is approached by word of mouth. My goal is to help people explore all that life has to offer, not to be limited by other people's ideas and rules, he says. If you and Hillary would like to schedule a session, we can discuss these concepts in more detail. He continued with genuine charm. "I'll think about it," I said. I really didn't understand what he was talking about. Once we got home, Hillary told me about her conversation with Chloe. She seems like a smart woman, but she let slip a couple times about Banks. Hillary also said that Chloe went out of her way to let her know that it was her money that paid for most of their lifestyle. Interesting. So far, in my opinion, Banks has been a nice guy, a bit of a charmer, but at this point I don't see anything wrong with him. Wednesday night, Banks stops by our apartment to show us a real estate prospectus. I tell him I'm not interested. He looks disappointed, but quickly returns to his confident demeanor, as if my answer didn't hurt him. On Wednesday night, Hillary was burning with fatigue after 3 consecutive 10-hour shifts. Tonight was no exception. Banks was attentive and funny, and that cheered her up. He asked about her schedule, and she said Thursday was a day she could relax. Most Thursdays, she and I would go to the beach where she could bask in the sun, swim in the ocean, and relax. So far, I've been able to get away on Thursdays. "What are your favorite beaches?" Banks asked. "Kauai and Hapuna are our favorite places," replied Hillary. Then she looked at me and winked. Since our first visit, we had visited M Beach several times. Eventually, we invited Banks to join us in Kauai. I wanted her to continue getting to know Banks as much as I did. He turned out to be a good friend, and I imagined that he and Chloe could be our married couple. Hillary looked gorgeous, and a couple times I caught him looking at her. I couldn't blame him, but a little flame of jealousy flared briefly. At one point, I got hot and went for a swim. Both Hillary and Banks refused, no big deal. When I came back from the bath, I found them laughing and joking about something, but when I climbed back under the covers, they were silent, discussing what it was. Hmm. On the way home, Banks asked us if we had been scuba diving. Neither of us had, but we were both curious. Banks told us about a place in Kona where you could take some lessons and get certified. We were interested. Hillary was especially interested. The longer we lived here, the happier I became. And I wanted Hillary to love this lifestyle as much as I did. I was glad we could start a new hobby together. Banks said he had a boat and that he went to a special place that had an amazing reef and always interesting sea life. We agreed to go on a boat trip with him in a few weeks. When we got back to the apartment after Banks left, we discussed the previous day. "You're right. He's a really nice guy. I enjoyed our day today," Hillary said. I was glad she felt that way. If he and Chloe were going to be our friends, I wanted us all to get along. "Hey, what were you two laughing so hard about when I went swimming?" I asked her. She looked at me, trying to remember what I asked her, and then quickly looked away as the shadow of a smile flashed across her lips. "Oh, nothing. Banks was just trying to make a joke," she said, and I thought she blushed. "Making a joke? What's so funny?" I asked, perhaps too sternly. "Nothing, just don't be so controlling," she said. And that was the end of it. We signed up for scuba lessons. The first step was to take the course online, which we did. On Saturday, we met at one of the hotel's large pools to use the equipment. The last step was 4 open dives to get certified. Banks told us he was an instructor, and why don't we practice on the day we plan to go boating with him? It seemed like a good idea. We met at the harbor and headed out to sea. We went past the airport by less than a mile. The water here was blue and calm. We put on our snorkeling gear, and Banks told us about the safety precautions the instructor had shown us at the hotel pool. He also said that the water here wasn't deep and we would go down for a few minutes to make sure everything was okay. We put on short wetsuits and snorkeling gear. "What about the sharks?" Hillary asked. "There are occasional small reef sharks. I only saw one once. The big ones, like tiger sharks, aren't here," Banks explained. We climbed down the ladder and cautiously began to explore the underwater world. It was beautiful. I had no trouble breathing. "This is really cool," I thought. I started to dive deeper and felt a pain in my sinuses pressing on my head. I tried to ignore it, but the deeper I went, the more excruciating it became. I had to surface. But even at the surface, the pain wouldn't go away. I had to get out. I sat in the boat with no gear and gradually began to feel better. My blood pressure seemed to go down. After a few minutes, Banks and Hillary came out of the water and asked what was wrong. I explained that I had a headache. Hillary started to go up the ramp to check on me, but I told them to keep diving. I was going to be fine. After talking to me briefly, I told them I was fine, and they continued diving. After about half an hour, they surfaced. Hillary was so excited and seemed to be having a great time. I really hoped that the cause of my discomfort had not persisted. As a thank you, we invited Banks over for dinner. Over the past few weeks, we have developed a very friendly relationship. When we came to Hawaii, I wanted to make good friends and have a social life. It seemed like we were moving in the right direction. Every now and then, the fact that Hillary was comfortable with Banks caused flashes of jealousy. But I knew that was my problem and tried to suppress those feelings. Friday night was Pau Hana night again at the Palms restaurant. We found ourselves at a large table with Clarence and Lynn, the Platt family, and the Bankses. "Is Chloe coming?" I asked the Bankses. "No, unfortunately she's in LA for the next few weeks. Probably on business for a major bank," he replied. I had to admit that he wasn't the least bit upset about his wife's absence. We all talked, socialized, ate, and drank. At one point, I saw Hillary talking to a young Corey White. I waited a few minutes and joined them. They were talking about scuba diving. She told him about my problems, and he recognized that it was a real problem, and that some people suffer from that kind of pressure. At this point, a gorgeous blonde woman approached us. Corey introduced us. "This is my older sister, Kiki. She doesn't work at the Palms full-time, but lives in our family condo when she's in Hawaii," Corey said. "She is blonde, slender, and beautiful, a walking Barbie doll." We learned that she is an independent IT professional and has a condo in Santa Clara, too. During our brief conversation, I learned that she is divorced. "I love Hawaii and try to come here as often as possible," she says. I start to remember my first impression of Corey. He seems like a pretty solid guy. That's when Banks shows up and the mood immediately changes. Kiki, who just a minute ago was chatting and laughing, gives me a negative look and shuts up. Corey has a look on his face like he wants to punch Banks. Banks is charming as always, oblivious to the negative sentiment. What's going on here? Kiki excuses herself and Corey walks away without saying a word. That was weird. And we start talking about scuba diving and Hillary talks about how much she enjoyed it. Banks talks about the different techniques and seems to know a lot about them. Brian, I hope we can find out what makes you uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to stop. This is so much fun, Hillary adds. Well, since I can't go, you sure can, I say. He's right, and I'd be happy to be your tour guide, Banks adds. I hope he's just a good friend. There's a lull in the work, and then it suddenly becomes fluid. I spend my days in our bedroom analyzing commodity markets and talking to people on the phone. One of the keys to my success is the ability to dig deep. Weather events such as a tornado, drought, or flood can quickly change commodity prices. A few percentage points to one side or the other can make or lose big money. One of my high school friends, Dan Bain, is a climate scientist. To put it bluntly, Dan is very nerdy and yet very smart. He has all these weather forecasts for months in advance. Dan also still lives at home and doesn't use the phone. You'll have to meet him in person. Like I said, he's weird. There's an agricultural conference in Seattle in a few weeks. That kind of information might be helpful too. I plan to attend the 2-day conference and then stop by Dan's relatives in Federal Way and talk to Dan about a 3-day trip. Hillary might want to spend a few days in Seattle. I called my sales manager in the Seattle office and told him my plans. Brian, I think it's a great idea. It will fit in well with our mentoring program that starts next Monday, said my sales manager. I had completely forgotten about this commitment. When I informed them of my move, my company had an ironclad rule about mentoring new hires. I was mentored, and it helped. Remote employees were assigned an apprentice who worked with them for 1 week straight and continued to help them after a week of one-on-one work. I accepted as I had no choice. It had been almost 2 weeks, but we both had friends and family to catch up with in Puget Sound. That night when Hillary got home, I told her about the trip to Seattle for 12 days. Brian, I can't do that, Hillary exclaimed. Why not? I asked. It would mean missing 2 weeks of shifts in a row, and I'm still on probation, she said. I don't know if I can take even one of the weeks off, she continued. Gee, I didn't want to stay with her that long, but living in a tropical paradise is a sacrifice. The following week, I made a doctor's appointment for ear, eye, nose, and throat problems related to my scuba diving. The Asian doctor questioned me about my pains. He examined my nose, throat, and ears. He paid special attention to my left ear. Nay, Mr. Rivers, it looks like you have a problem with the eardrum in your ear. I would highly discourage you from engaging in underwater activities at depths greater than 10 feet. Snorkeling might be okay, but scuba diving could permanently rob you of your hearing, he said. Great. Now I'm going to hook Hillary up to a scuba diver and not be able to participate. On Wednesday, Banks and I went for a run on Alaya Drive. We discussed work and life. It didn't seem like he and Chloe had a particularly close marriage. We were talking in front of the house when Hillary got home from work. What a day, she said. I can't wait to go to the beach tomorrow. I need to bask in the sun, swim in the ocean, and not think about work, she added. Tomorrow at 9:30? Banks asked. Ha, I thought, I'm kind of confused. I was glad he had become such a good friend that he was comfortable inviting himself, but he could wait until we invited him. Sounds good, said Hillary. And that was the end of it. Thursday morning, I was up before 5 o'clock in the morning. The markets were up and down, which was very unnerving. Most importantly, you had to be a few steps ahead of everyone else to make money. Suddenly, my door swung open. Brian, you're not ready. We're leaving in 10 minutes, Hillary announced. I completely forgot, I said. There was no way I was going to leave. Hill, honey, I don't think I can go today. At least not right now, I told her. I could see she was starting to get angry. At that moment, the phone rang. Before answering it, I asked, Can you just go with Banks? I asked. She threw me a long, hard look, turned, and walked away. I answered the phone, and that was the end of it. Good thing we were in this time zone, and by mid-afternoon it was effectively over. I thought about getting dressed and trying to find them. I called Hillary, but she didn't pick up. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, I told myself. I must have fallen into a dead sleep because the next moment Hillary kissed me. I realized from the shadows that it was about 6 o'clock, and we made love. After a few minutes, she silently got up and went to the bathroom. The door closes and I hear the shower turn on. When she comes out, I thank her for the pleasant homecoming, and I barely manage to get a smile out of her. I ask her about the beach day, and she replies that they went to Qua Bay. I try to elicit the details of her day, but she's a bit and uncharacteristically quiet. If we hadn't just had amazing sex, I'd begin to suspect I'd done something obscure. My work continues to be hectic, and Friday is another long day. Hillary is in and out of the apartment all day, running errands. It's a relaxing weekend, but I'm left with the uneasy feeling that something isn't quite right. When I ask Hillary, she replies that everything is fine. It's Monday and the markets are volatile. I'm making money, but I'm making money. I do make a profit in my independent account. My goal is to retire early and fully enjoy life in Hawaii. Hillary works her regular schedule Monday through Wednesday. Thursday mornings, I work hard and she shows up around 9. Are you going to the beach? She asks. I look up and she realizes the answer is no. I burrow into my notes and don't move away from both computer screens. I have to leave for Seattle next Tuesday for a meeting and mentoring session, and I have a lot to catch up on by then. I'm stressed out. She kisses me on the cheek with a strange expression on her face, and just as I'm about to ask about the details of her beach day, the phone rings. Soon, I'm already figuring out soybean futures. At 6:30 that evening, the sushi I bought in town was on the dinner table. I wanted to make it up to Hillary, since I've been so busy lately. By 7 o'clock, she still wasn't home, so I finally called her. Where are you? I asked. I'll be there in 2 minutes, she replied. She shows up and thanks me for a wonderful dinner. I ask how the day went, and it turns out that she and Banks were at the beach again. I start doing deep breathing exercises to keep calm. Which beach did you go to today? I ask. She hesitates, looks away, and answers, Qua Bay. Somehow I feel like she's lying to me. I know I'll be leaving in a few days, and I want to keep my cool so I don't ask her any questions, at least for now. After dinner, we're both immersed in our own thoughts. Brian, she asks, do you think we're getting the most out of life? It's really weird. Yeah, I say, I mean, don't you think our lives are boring? That there's more to the world than what we're experiencing? Not really, but why? I ask. I have no idea what she's getting at or where these deep philosophical questions come from. Oh, never mind, she says, and before we can continue talking, she snores softly. On Friday, the markets are suddenly stable. I'm not sure how long this will last, but if typical trends continue, the next few weeks should be manageable. Friday. I leave the office in the middle of the afternoon and Hillary is not in the apartment. I call her, thinking maybe we can do something fun this afternoon, but she doesn't pick up. I decide to go for a run down Aaliyah Drive. After the run, I head for the shower. It looks like Hillary is just finishing up her shower. I'm hoping for 2 ships passing in the night. She leaves and I head to the shower. She's not interested. Friday night is Pauhana night. On the way down, I ask Hillary how her day went, but get no specific answers about what she did all day. We set up in our usual spot next to the Platts. Lynn and Clarence are there too. Banks wasn't there. Honestly, I was getting a little tired of him. Besides, it seemed like Hillary was spending more time with him than I was. I try to keep my jealousy in check. I see Corey White, who I was starting to really like. We start talking and he tells me about his research in marine biology. It's pretty interesting. So, Brian, why don't you come out on the boat with me on Monday? I have something to check out that day and I think you might be interested, Corey says. Maybe, but what time? I asked. The markets have slowed down and I'm working a lot. Hillary works all day. Seems like a good break. I'll be in port at 11. If you know where Redmond moors his boat, I'm a couple slipways down. That's the Konkiki. You won't miss it. If you're not there by 11:30, I'll assume something's up, he tells me. When I walk back to our table, I don't see Hillary. I try to act casual, but there's no way I can spot her. I talk to Clarence and Lynn, occasionally looking over their shoulder for Hillary. After a few minutes, Clarence says, I think I saw your fiancé by the pool. Oh, I say and quickly cast a glance in that direction before I can contain myself. Don't worry. Your friend Mr. Redmond was with her, Lynn adds, perhaps with a note of sarcasm. Go, my boy, go find her. Clarence dismisses me, and I walk away. When I approach them, they seem to be having a tense conversation. I don't like the way Hillary looks at him, as if every word he says has a serious meaning. They don't notice me until I'm practically right next to them. When they see me, Hillary looks flustered, like she's been caught doing something wrong. Banks is his charming personality. I'm starting to see that charm in a different context. Brian, Banks exclaims and climbs up for a hug. I don't reciprocate him. What is this seclusion away from events? I ask. Hillary still doesn't answer anything and looks like she's at a loss. Banks enters the conversation. Sometimes the old gang get a bit stale, he says. I was just describing to Hillary some of my self-actualization exercises. With her busy profession, there are lots of ways to keep calm and deal with stress, he reflects. Hillary looks at me expectantly, hoping I'll believe the nonsense that just came out of his mouth. And Hill, since when do they know each other so well? Actually, Brian, we were discussing the possibility that the three of us should go to counseling to broaden our outlook on life. Like I said, I don't charge money for my sessions. This is my gift to humanity. He continues. I look directly at Hillary and say, I'm going back to our friends, have 2 more beers and go home. You can join me if you want. I deliberately ignore Banks and all the nonsense he just said. A gift to humanity? I walk back to our table, and about 30 seconds later, Hillary is next to me. Why were you so mean to Banks? He's your good friend. She asks in a quiet but firm voice. I freeze for a moment and then utter, I'm starting to sense something from him that I don't really like. What are you talking about? She asks. With all the stress that's been going on in my life lately, and knowing that I'm leaving for Seattle in a few days for almost 2 weeks, I really don't want to get into a conversation with her. I'm making a silent vow to myself to distance myself from her as soon as I get back from my business trip. Hillary and I are going to have a serious talk when I get back too. Never mind, I say. On Monday, I joined Corey on the Kon-Kiki yacht. We talked about his work, the ocean, and marine life in the area. It's really quite interesting, and he seems to be passionate about it. I'm working on a project with tiger sharks in the Hawaiian Islands area. I'm working with the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology. We've developed an experimental attractant that I believe will quickly lure the sharks to the injection site. If we figure out what attracts them, we hope to redesign the process and create an effective repellent. I've actually never tried that combination. Brian, you'll be the first witness to this test. Nan, Corey pulled a bottle from the foam cooler that looked like an 8-ounce bottle. He lowered a protein ball made from fish innards and seaweed into the water, then poured about half the container on it and let it go. He then set a timer on his watch. Corey told me that sharks have an exceptional sense of smell and that tiger sharks can pick up odors up to a mile away. We watched and waited. Nothing was happening yet. Just wait, I'm sure of it, he assured me. Suddenly, the surface of the ocean seemed to change and come alive. I saw my first dorsal fin, then another, and another. Squirrel globules suddenly attacked and devoured with terrible force. It was exciting and frightening. Corey explained that the tiger shark feeds indiscriminately. It has huge, powerful jaws that can crack the shell of a turtle. Tiger sharks can reach 15 feet in length and are second only to the great white shark in size. They are considered primates among predators. The boat was bumped a couple times, but within 15 minutes the sea was calm again. That was exciting, I said to Corey. He looked pleased with the results and typed on his tablet for a while. It certainly doesn't make me want to get in the water anytime soon, I said. It was a very unnatural situation, Corey told me. Without the attractant, we would never have been able to lure the sharks down here. Corey went downstairs to put his clipboard away, and I looked at the vials in the styrofoam cooler. It looked like there were a dozen vials in the styrofoam cooler, stacked in a haphazard pile. I thought. A moment later, Corey came up on deck. I quickly turned to him. Brian, there's another reason I asked you to come with me today. Corey said this with a serious expression on his face. Well, you can tell me to mind my own business when I'm done, but there's something I think you need to know about. He continued. To say I was confused at this point is an understatement. I just stayed quiet and listened to what Corey had to say. He asked if I remembered his older sister Kiki. How could I forget that beautiful girl? She was married to a great guy, Ben Green. Ben handled the finances, and they would come to the family home in Hawaii 4 times a year. Ben was able to do some of his work remotely. Apparently, he and Ben became friends with some of the other residents of Kona Palms. One of them was Banks Redmond. Banks has a sly charm and asks questions that soon turn personal. Yeah, I know, I said. One day, Ben had to return to California early, and Kiki kept in touch with Banks. Corey told me that he was an undergraduate student at UCLA at the time. All of this information came from Kiki. While Banks was away, he became increasingly close to Kiki. He talks about his counseling sessions and how he gets people to expand their horizons and live a more practical life. It sounded familiar to me. Long story short, Kiki had sex with him during a tantric massage session. She soon realized that he was no different than the creepy frat boy who tries to get a freshman girl into his room at a party on campus. She was angry at him, and even more angry at herself for falling for his bullshit. Banks tried to continue the relationship, but Kiki told him to just back off. About a week later, Ben returned. Kiki felt so guilty that she told Ben everything. Ben was furious and went in search of Banks. Banks was smart enough to stay away. Kiki and Ben tried to patch things up, but the combination of her guilt and his anger proved too much and they divorced. She hasn't dated again since. I still talk to Ben sometimes. He's a nice guy. I think he's engaged to someone, Corey told me. That damn Banks ruined Kiki's life. I just sat there thinking. Banks Redmond is a slick operator. I genuinely thought he was a good friend. Brian, I promised Kiki not to say anything about this to anyone. But when I see him interacting with Hillary, I remember that Kiki told me about how he manipulated her. She also made me promise never to have a physical confrontation with him, even though God knows I wanted to kill the bastard. Kiki is ashamed of all this and is very sad that it cost her her marriage, he said. Does Chloe, his wife, know about all this? I ask. I'm sure she knows, or at least suspects. Rumor has it they don't have a prenup. If she divorces him, she'll lose a fortune. And she's rich. They're still married, but they live separately. I'm leaving for Australia next week and it will be months before I return. I don't want to question Hillary's character. I just wanted to give you this information, Corey said. Thank you, I tell him. I have a lot to think about. We dock at the harbor and pick up our gear. As we walk up the gangway, he sets down a styrofoam cooler and opens it. I can see him mentally counting. Suddenly, he raises his eyes to me. I look him in the eye and say nothing. We look at each other and then a small smile appears on his face. No words were spoken. As I was driving home, I started to feel sick. I was going to kill Banks, I thought. Mentally, I almost hit a local kid when I ran a stop sign. He brushed me off and I didn't blame him. It reminded me of another incident that happened about 7 or 8 years ago in Seattle. I've always had a temper. I won't go into details, but there were a lot of ups and downs in my family. That energy fueled me on the football field. In high school, I played in every conference and eventually was invited to play at Pacific Lutheran. It was the only way to go to college. My family had no money for tuition. So, in a way, my character helped me get a college education. It cost me some girlfriends and other friendships along the way. I realized that I needed to fight it. At the time, I was still in college and new to sales, and it was stressful. One Monday night, I was driving through downtown Seattle. If you've never been there, the concentration of homeless, drunks, and punks there is higher than usual. All worked up and not focused on driving, I almost hit a skateboarder at an intersection. I put my palms up to let him know it was my fault. And this tall, skinny, long-haired punk takes his skateboard, swings around and smashes my headlight. I jump out of the car and the punk and his skateboarding buddy start throwing shit at me and I yell about the headlight. As I'm facing the tall guy, out of the corner of my eye, I notice movement. My athletic reflexes kick in, and I dodge another dude who tries to blow my head off with his skateboard. He hits me in the shoulder and it hurts, but I'm able to function. I immediately turn to him and land a straight right punch to the jaw, and he falls to the ground. I'm glad I trained at the Golden Gloves Boys Club. Instinctively, I duck, expecting an attack from the first punk. Once again, I dodge a skateboard aimed at my head. Are these punks practicing to use these things as weapons? He raises it again to try and attack, and I punch him hard in the face. I hear something break. In a blind rage, I continue to punch the son of a bitch. I must have managed 3 or 4 more shots before I'm grabbed from behind. It's the cops! I end up in the back of a cop car. Outside, an ambulance pulls up, and on the other side of the intersection is another police car with its lights on. There are a lot of people around wanting to see what's going on. I pray that no one recognizes me. Fortunately, there are witnesses who tell the police officers that I was attacked first, with 2 of them and 1 of me. Someone even has a cell phone video that shows they were the instigators. They collected my information and let me go. They said I would be contacted in the next few days. The next day in the afternoon, I received a call from the police. They asked me to come later in the afternoon to make a statement, and I did. Here's what happened. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that I was defending myself. There was plenty of evidence to back it up. It turned out that the first guy I hit has a dislocated jaw and will need extensive dental work to repair his shattered mouth. The second guy has a broken nose and orbital bone. Because of the severity of the beating, I need to see an addiction counselor. We had a long talk and she said that no charges would be filed against me, but I would have to have mandatory counseling with a psychiatrist. Anger management is part of mental health. For the next 8 weeks, I was signed up for group therapy every Wednesday night at Swedish Hospital. I probably could have resisted, but I knew something had to be done. Truth be told, this counseling really helped me and changed my life in several ways. I have learned to stop myself when I get angry, slow down, think through the situation, analyze it, and make a plan. In doing so, I take deep breaths to slow down. Deep breaths? Deep breaths? It really helps. Friends and people at work have commented that I seem more relaxed. I'm in a good mood more often. I didn't get angry as often and laughed more. I also started attracting more women. Perhaps they used to be scared off by my anger. Speaking of women, it was at Swedish Hospital that I met Hillary. I often spotted her in the hallways, this incredibly beautiful woman with a tinge of sadness. One evening after a consultation, I offered to take her out for coffee and she, to my surprise, agreed. I truly believe. Had it not been for the counseling I received, I never would have asked her to do so. My goal was to get her into bed, which we eventually did, but along the way I started to like her. It was a little unclear to me if she liked me too, but she kept saying yes when I asked her out. She would tell me that I was different than others she had dated. At the time, I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Eventually, we ended up in my bed and she certainly knew what to do and willingly told me what she liked. As we lay side by side, she asked, "So this is our last date?" and looked at me. I was actually contemplating an exit strategy. I liked her, and I had just found out she was great in bed, but I really wasn't looking for commitment. I must have procrastinated too long because she cried quietly. Wait, I said. No one talks about a last date, at least I don't. Now tell me, why all the tears? I asked. We talk and she tells me how wonderful I am, and that I'm so different from regular guys, and that all doctors are narcissistic assholes. I don't ask her too often about all the asshole doctors, but I'm sure she has a few stories. I think of Hillary. She looks great. She's fun to be with. She has brains. She's not stupid. No real weaknesses. We continue to date, and as you've probably already realized, we're staying together. At least for now. Back to Hawaii and the current moment. At an intersection on Ali, I stopped to gather my thoughts. I don't know if anything has happened, but I now know Banks's plan of action. My goal is to get Hillary and myself out of his web. After that, I will need to develop a serious plan for Hillary. As Clarence once told me, a good relationship is built on trust. Right now, our foundation is not as strong as I would like it to be. I'm considering canceling the trip, but I'm setting myself up to take a big step forward in the next few weeks. The market is ripe for profit-taking. With the little knowledge I will gain from the conference, and more importantly from Dan, my brilliant climatologist friend, I am confident that I can make the right moves. I'm calm, I'm in observation mode, and I'm going to find out what the hell is going on with Hillary and Banks. She came home Monday night and is in a bad mood. I'm trying to figure out how to approach her, but the time hasn't come yet. I know that if I push her at the wrong time, it could backfire, and it will be much harder to get any information. Tuesday night, things are a little different. She is more relaxed and friendly after work, and we enjoy a nice dinner. I tell her that Clarence and Lynn are taking me to the airport on Wednesday, and could she pick me up a week later on Friday? She agrees. Hillary, I ask, are you sure you can't come with me? It would be like a vacation. I know it's a long shot, but I have to try. She doesn't even consider the possibility and quickly dismisses it, citing work. Then I start broaching the uncomfortable subject of Banks. I tell her that I think we need to put some distance between us and him. I tell her, without elaborating, that I've heard some negative things about him. I ask her to stay away from him while I'm gone. She flares up. How dare I say those things about our friend? Banks listened to her, started counseling, and she got much better, she adds. And now I want her to stay away from him until I'm gone for 2 weeks and she has no other friends? She's mad, and now I'm mad too. I don't trust him, and you shouldn't either, I state. There you go, jealousy again, she says. And so it goes on for the rest of the day. She ended up staying asleep in the guest room even after I tried to apologize. That night really went downhill. And I got a kiss and a brief hug before leaving for the airport, but it wasn't as warm. I feel like our marriage is on the precipice and she has no idea how serious our situation is. I was reminded of a bumper sticker I once saw. The first line read, "If you love something, set it free." And the second, "If it doesn't come back, hunt it down and kill it." It seemed fitting for the current situation to me. Because of the time change, by the time I landed, it was already evening. I rent a car and head to the Marriott. It's 9:30 p.m. Pacific time, which means 6:30 p.m. in Hawaii. I don't call her that night. I'm tired. The next day, there is an agriculture conference and I gather some good information. Afterward, I talk to a few people and learn a lot of useful things. I type my notes into my iPad and then someone says there's a cocktail party going on in the next room. I check my watch. It's a little after 6 p.m. Pacific time, which means it's 3 in the afternoon in Hawaii. I try to call Hillary. She's not picking up. I have a few cocktails and eat enough appetizers that I don't eat dinner. Around 8:30 p.m., I try calling again, but there is no answer. The conference ends Friday mid-afternoon. I find that the information I received was useful. As I'm entering new notes, Hillary calls. "Hi, how's the conference going?" she asks. And we discuss my trip. "I tried to call you yesterday. What did you do?" I ask. I want to know what she's been up to, but I'm walking on eggs. Fighting over Banks isn't going to lead to anything good. She says she's been doing the usual things, running errands, grocery shopping, and so on. I ask if she went to the beach yesterday, and she says she did, but not for long. I ask which beach. She hesitates and says, Qua Bay. I really want to ask if Banks was with her, but I hesitate. I ask what her plans are for the weekend. She tells me that there will be no Pau Hana today, and that she plans to have a quiet weekend. I tell her I love her as we hang up. This phone conversation went well. My strategy is to be sweet and loving to her. If Banks tries to seduce her, I will hope that her love for me will overcome his advances. On Saturday, I'm going to the Baines house on Federal Way. They were our neighbors in Tacoma when I was growing up. Mr. and Mrs. Bain are nice people, and I'm always happy to see them. Like I said before, Dan is weird. He literally lives in his parents' basement, but it's not as weird as you might think. One of Dan's habits is that he is an absolute neatnik. Everything in his basement is clean and organized. He has file cabinets and bookshelves where everything is cataloged and organized. And he sits at his desk, which is in the very center of the basement. On the desk are 2 huge monitors. In the corner is a small cot that he sleeps on. Dan is dressed in slacks and a short-sleeve button-up shirt. He rarely leaves the house. You can see that he's happy to see me. I don't think he'll have many guests. We spend time talking about the past, about our old neighborhood and the people we grew up with. Honestly, it's a nice pastime for me to spend time with Dan. I don't know how he makes his money or who exactly pays him. All I know is that he makes money. He builds complex computer weather models using all sorts of data, both current and historical. He's tried to explain this to me before, but I was quickly lost. Like I said, Dan is brilliant. I've asked him before if he ever provides information to people in my business. He replied that he doesn't. If Dan can be relied upon, he is completely honest. I have a list of things I want to ask him about. I have to make sure he doesn't deviate from his current task or will touch on topics that could take hours to cover. I ask him these specific questions and also ask him to make a weather chart for the next 90 days or so and bring various factors into the equation. His mom brings us lunch and we continue talking for a few more hours. Then I leave. I tell him I'll call and he replies that please don't. Dan doesn't like the phone. He sends the weather maps I asked him for within 24 hours. In the evening, I try to call Hillary, but I get voicemail again. Sunday, I go out for a run. I return to the hotel and start working on a trading strategy based on the information I've gathered. I have a really good feeling about this. I've never done such a deep dive before. Hillary and I finally connect. She seems eager to talk to me. I think that's a good sign. She asks me about the conference and her visit with Dan Bain. Her voice is very upbeat. I tell her she is happy. Brian, I just love this place. Hawaii has everything I wanted and more. I love the weather, I love our condo, and even the job turned out better than I thought it would. I'm just thrilled with our decision to move. She exclaims. That makes me happy. It was really my decision to move, and Hillary disagreed with it a bit. I'm glad she likes Hawaii as much as I do. I ask her what was the reason for this sudden revitalization. I connect with Banks, and he helps me better understand myself and what life experiences are, she continues. I continue to remain silent. I start to get angry. I take so many deep breaths I might pass out. I wonder what kind of shit this asshole is feeding her. Probably after hearing Corey's story. Oh, really? I say calmly. Tell me about how he's helping you, I ask, trying to stay as calm as possible. I sit and listen as she talks about how she feels, about what life has to offer, how she is expanding her horizons and finding true happiness in all areas of her life. How Banks helps her realize things that explain some of her negative feelings. I'm starting to feel nauseous. I'm afraid I'm going to explode. I use one of my anger management techniques and calmly but firmly walk away from the conversation. I tell her I'll call her this week. I pondered the situation. Corey's story about Kiki kept playing in my head. I had a few options. 1. I could book a flight home and intervene. That was out of the question. I wouldn't do that. 2. I believe she loves me too much to give in to him. I would say it's 50-50 at this point. 3. Accept the fact that they have had or will have sex and divorce her. This was painful to think about. I started to develop a plan. My mentoring week went well. My intern was a young man named Michael Rodriguez. Mike was a hard worker and eager to learn. I spent several hours each day learning my own trade. The markets were calm and Dan's weather forecasts were hitting the mark so far. I had a trading plan for the next few weeks that was going to make me a lot of money. Monday, I don't call Hillary, and she doesn't call me. I know she's working. Tuesday morning, she calls around 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'm at work and we only talk for a few minutes. The exuberant excitement from our previous phone conversation continues. The week flies by quickly, and it's the end of the workday on Thursday. My plane leaves SeaTac tomorrow morning. I take my intern Michael Rodriguez out for a beer to celebrate his internship. It's a pleasant evening, and we talk mostly about the trade. On the way home, I'm relatively calm about learning about the Hillary/Banks situation. If he and all his crap seduced her, it's over. What I will do next has yet to be formulated. If the seduction doesn't happen, my strategy will be to slowly and decisively cut Banks out of our lives. The flight arrives in Kona around 4 in the afternoon. One of the small things I like about Kona is the quaint airport. Everything is outside, few interior buildings. Hillary picks me up at the curb. Hillary is in a good mood. A little weird, but good. She talks a lot, laughs a lot, and smiles a lot. She asks me questions about the trip, and when I start telling her about Baines or my mentor or whatever, it's like she's not interested. She asks me another question before I even finish answering the previous one. It's weird. It's Friday, and there's a Pauhana event at the pool. I'm tired, but I ask her if she wants to go anyway. She says she doesn't care. I don't mind if we don't go, she says. This is weird, too. Hillary loves any kind of party, and we haven't missed one since we've lived here. I think maybe there's some reason she doesn't want to attend these events. I think it would be fun, I say. I've been on the mainland too long, and I feel like having a couple glasses of Mai Tai, I add. Hillary is silent for a moment. I wouldn't mind being alone with you, she says and strokes my thigh. Okay, I say. We'll go away for an hour or so, and then we'll get reacquainted, I state. Hillary doesn't say anything, but the matter is settled. We go down a little after 6 in the usual lineup. Everyone is in place, but so far I don't see Banks. It's a very typical night at the Pauhana. We see Clarence and Lynn, the Platts and Nishimura, the couple that moved here a few months ago. I know Corey is in Australia, but I see Kiki across the street and get up to talk to her. I know I can't say anything about her relationship with Banks. I promised Corey I wouldn't. We start talking, and she is very sweet. She tells me that she is living in their family home indefinitely while Corey is in Australia. She explains that sometimes it's better to live in a condo while Corey is away. There's plenty of room, but sometimes I start to feel like a foster mom to my little brother and all his dates, she says with a laugh. After a while, I look outside and Hillary is looking at me, frowning slightly. Maybe it's her turn to get a little jealous? Kiki and I continue talking for another half hour or so. Every once in a while, I could feel the sadness slip in her as we moved on to some topic. I tell her how much I enjoyed talking to her, but I have to go home. As I leave, I get a brief but nice hug from her. Back at our table, I don't see Hillary. The ever-observant Clarence notices me looking for her. I think Mrs. Rivers left 15 minutes ago, he tells me. Oh, she must have gone back to the apartment, I say as I head toward the house. Brian, he says. I think she was heading towards Mr. Redmond's house. And dear boy, it's none of my business, but while you were on the mainland, they spent a lot of time together. Clarence told me this with an expression of some concern. Nodding slowly as I absorbed this information, I turned to Clarence and gave him a brief hug, thanking him. He seemed a little surprised by the hug. I'm off to our condo hash 508. My next Mai Tai contains more rum than juice, and all the ones after that are mostly rum. It's not even 9 p.m. yet, and the alcohol and jet lag are already making me pass out. When I wake up, it's 2:30 in the morning, so it's 5:30 Pacific time, which is about the time I usually get up. I don't want to wake Hillary, so I head to the spare bedroom. I take a short nap, but by 6 a.m., I'm up and out for a run on Elia Drive. I have a lot to think about. Hillary's behavior, Banks, the commodities market, Clarence's comments, and I'm also thinking about Kiki White. One thing is for sure, Hillary and I are going to have a very frank conversation about Banks and the future. Tonight, back at the apartment, Hillary is drinking her morning coffee. She smiles and asks how my run went. I reply that it was fine and then ask her about last night. What happened last night? I ask. I went back to the table and you were gone. Where did you go? I'm pretty sure she went to Banks's apartment. I just didn't have anything to do last night. I just needed a break, she tells me. Well, you weren't here, I say. Where did you go? I ask. You know how it is sometimes, you just don't feel like being at a party. You looked like you were having a good time. I didn't want to ruin your fun. She told me with a brief smile. Hillary, for the third time, I say a little more forcefully, but still calmly. Where did you go? She pauses, looks at me, and then lowers her eyes. After about a minute, she says, I went to talk to Banks. I try to stay calm, but I'm starting to get angry. I say to her, so your husband was gone for almost 2 weeks and you ended up spending time with Banks? When I got home, you weren't yourself, she tells me. I'm furious. She's avoiding my questions, and her relationship with Banks is too close. It's ruined our marriage. I need to know the truth about what's going on. When I question her about her relationship with Banks, she finally says the following. He's counseling me. He really understands me. He shows me how to experience more and live a fuller life. When I'm with him, I'm calm. My stress evaporates and I can physically relax. Why the hell is this asshole feeding her? I lost my temper, started yelling, and told her I would talk to him and deal with it once and for all. We had a huge fight and she left. I decided not to go to Banks's apartment anymore. I'm practicing calming exercises. Deep breaths, deep exhale. Right now, I can't afford the assault and battery charge. I'm hanging out at the condo, and Hillary's not coming back. I wouldn't be surprised if Banks has her. Earlier in the day, I text her saying we need to have a serious talk. A few hours later, she replies that she'll be home at 6 p.m. and is ready to talk. I spend the rest of the day planning my strategy. It basically boils down to what I was thinking while I was on the mainland. If she had sex with him, we're screwed. If she didn't, we cut him out of our lives. I have another plan for Banks. Doorbell rings at 6 o'clock. Why is she ringing the doorbell? When I open it, I see Hillary and her escort, Banks. He looks at me with a calm and smug expression on his face. I flare up, quickly going into calming exercises for several reasons, including to avoid hitting him. What the hell is he doing here? I ask. Hillary looks at me with an expression of patience. Banks and I have a lot to tell you, and it's best if we discuss it together. Banks and I want to kick him out, but curiosity about what they're going to say takes over my initial impulse. I need to get to the bottom of this. I really need to know what's going on. Okay, I say. Why don't you start telling me what's going on? We move into the living room. They're sitting on the couch facing me. I sit down in the only chair. Brian, you know I've had self-esteem issues my whole life, she says. She looks at me, waiting for an answer. I just stare back at her dumbly. So, she continues, I'm starting to realize the origins of some of these problems. Banks is revealing this information to me. I feel so strong and happy. For the first time in my life, I feel truly happy. Are you telling me you're not happy in our marriage? I ask. No, Brian, honey, I love you. You're wonderful. It's not about you. It's about me understanding myself, pushing my boundaries and ultimately being a better life partner for you. Banks is teaching me so much, she says. No, I'm getting close, Brian. I'm almost to the point where I can live life to the fullest. She pleads. Outwardly, I'm calm, but inside I'm more than angry. Her stupidity and his bullshit has gotten to me. Deep breath. Deep breath. Make a plan. I sit still and say nothing. They probably think I don't understand anything. Brian, Banks cut in with a professorial look. There's a little kid living inside each of us seeking parental approval. Hillary has abandonment issues caused by being abandoned by her father. She used her looks to try to get that approval. What are we, in our first year of psychology school? I wonder if this idiot believes the nonsense that comes out of his mouth. He goes on and on about expanding horizons, breaking down personal barriers, and learning about all aspects of life. I'm starting to get tired of it all and actually pass out. But I notice one thing. Hillary is looking at him in a very different way than I saw her looking at Dr. Greg Gorsuch all those months ago. All his chatter seemed to have come to an end. And then he said something that shocked me. Hillary will stay with me for the next week, and we can get over the last hurdles and get her ready for a full life. What? I shrieked. You're moving? I asked. It's hard to stay calm with news like this. Brian, honey. She's literally on her knees, clasping her hands together as if in prayer. It's only for a week or so, she pleads. At that, a hopeful smile appears on her face, as if she wants me to realize the importance of all of this. Are you sleeping with this guy? I ask. At this point, I need to sort through all this shit and realize what's really going on. Oh, Brian, sex isn't that important in the scheme of life, she says. Banks nods prudently, as if his student has learned his lesson, and the professor confirms it. Brian. Banks ponders. Humanity has many ways of communicating. Sight, sound, hearing, and of course touch. Old morals can limit people in what they can experience in order to live the most fulfilling lives. Anyway, he just told me they were having fun. I remember that first time at the beach when he looked at her in a bikini. Hillary, I say. I make one last attempt. Don't do this. You're my wife. We have some problems, but we can work through them. Don't leave me. Honey, she pleads, it's just a week. One little week out of our lives. I'll come back and be the best version of myself for you for the rest of our lives. She says this while looking at me with the same blissful smile on her face. With those words, Banks stands up and Hillary follows suit. As they walk out the door, she shouts, I love you to me. That night, I hardly slept at all. I know my marriage is over, but I'm not as sad as it may seem. Most of all, I am angry. Specifically, I'm angry at Banks. I'm starting to think through my plan. I've done a little research and I think I've determined what type of predator Banks is. He considers himself a top-level predator. It's not enough for him to entertain a woman. It's not enough for him to entertain another man's woman. It's also not enough for him to entertain another man's woman, for a man to know about it. He has to entertain another man's woman, and the man has to accept it. That is not going to happen here. Sunday morning, I go out for a run on Alaya Drive. It's a crowded street this morning. Along the way, I immerse myself in reflection, working on my acting skills. For my plan to work, I have to be believable. On the way back, I see Kiki outside the building. I wave at her and we get to talking. She says she's going out for coffee. I ask if I can join her. Is Hillary going to join us too? She asks. I hesitate and then say that we are not together. She says she saw us together 2 days ago at Pauhana. I tell her it's a long story if she's interested. I feel like with all the gossip about Kona Palms, she's already guessing. Of course I'm interested. Let's get coffee, Kiki replies. We walk over to the Java on the rocks. We walk outside. I am well dressed in my running clothes. I tell Kiki a very brief version of my situation with Hillary and with Banks. She's quiet, just taking it all in, but I can tell it's very personal to her. We both got hurt because of Banks Redmond. As we walk back, we talk about other topics and we have a really good conversation. Kiki is starting to like me. We walk back and I ask her if we could get together next weekend. She starts to shake her head in refusal and I stop her. Kiki, I'm not Banks, I say. I like you as a friend. At the moment, I'm married. But I expect my marital status to change very quickly. You know why. But come on, two friends dating for now. She smiles and it's like sunshine. Good, I guess. I'd like to see you again. But for now, we're just friends. She hugs me briefly and kisses my cheek. As she walks away, I notice her step bounces. It's Monday, and the markets are quiet, but I sense that change will come quickly. I've been studying Dan's models, and they match the information I learned at the agricultural conference. I am making big moves in corn and coffee. I'm getting into soybean futures. I make all these moves before the market has time to react. I have my own LLC that is drowned in a few offshore corporations. It's legal, I just like to keep things separate. It may eventually lead to me, but it would take a lot of resources. This is my secret account. It's through the LLC that I conduct my transactions. If I do everything right, my secret account holds at least $500,000. In fact, it could be as high as $1 million. I haven't seen either Hillary or Banks at Kona Palms since Saturday night. All is well, but I need to contact Banks to put my plan into action. I got to the office early Wednesday morning and so far so good. I see a trend, and others seem to be noticing it too. The main difference is that I managed to get in while prices were low. At 9:30 a.m., I take a walk around the grounds of the Palms Hotel. On the lawn, I see Banks practicing martial arts. I quickly envision myself as a beaten, insecure man. I stop him and apologize. I startled him, and I think at first he thought I was going to attack him. I thanked him for helping Hillary and asked if he and I could talk sometime. Nodding, he agreed that was a good idea. Suddenly, as if it had just occurred to me, I told him that I needed to do one more dive to get certified as a scuba diver. We could go, he would instruct me, and help me help Hillary. I asked him not to say anything to Hillary about us being together. I don't want to distract her from the work you and she are doing together. I told him this with a frank and serious expression on my face and frowning eyebrows. We agreed to meet at the harbor on Thursday at 3 p.m. I gave him a hug as we left. Thank God this guy has such a big ego. He wants to complete his domination over me by getting me to agree to let him entertain my wife. It fits into my plan. I have an appointment with a divorce attorney this afternoon. I discussed the situation with my new attorney, Gerald Chin. He asked me what level of aggression I wanted to approach this case with. Humiliation with time off from work, restraining orders, accusations of adultery. What would I want to do? I tell him I need to think this through. I ask him to start the paperwork. I get up early Thursday morning. There is a lot to do. First of all, I have a long bike ride north on Aaliyah to the Queen K Highway. I get back before 10 a.m. I look at the markets and everyone seems to be following my forecast, and I'm supposed to meet Banks at the harbor at 3 p.m. After running around a bit, I get there shortly after 2 p.m. I carefully reload my gear onto his boat. I'm wearing a cheap, flowery Hawaiian shirt and a big clip-on hat. I never wear clothes like that. He shows up at 3 in the afternoon. I act submissive and obey him, trying to hurt his ego. We chat non-stop as we settle in. Brian, he begins, I thought you had an inner ear problem that made you unable to dive? He asks. I got another report and they said I'm probably diving too deep and too fast. It'll take me longer to get down to reef level, but I was assured that if I go down slowly, I'll be fine. It was utter nonsense, but he bought it. Tell me, I ask, how's Hillary doing? I'm so glad his ego is so inflated. I don't feel any suspicion about what I've done. He says she's evolving. He has put her in a program that helps her find herself. She is blossoming, and her beauty is blossoming too. He says she is overcoming insecurities and expanding her horizons in all areas of her life. In fact, he says, when she is back in your bed, you will be very pleased with everything she has learned. I will be happy to be her instructor, and you will be the recipient of the skills she has acquired. Hillary is a very sensual woman. It took all my self-control not to hit him at this point, but I remain nonchalantly submissive. I nod my head as if everything he said suddenly makes sense. Thank you. I tell him with an expression of awe on my face. He agrees. The average man, he nods in my direction, has no idea what to do with a woman as beautiful as Hillary. You have to understand them first and separate all the layers until you realize exactly what they want. I have helped many women better understand their own sexuality. Like I said, that's my gift to those I counsel. If the sea had been a little more rough, I would have written off my nausea as seasickness. But no, today the sea is calm. In life, you will meet people who are not like members of the animal kingdom. He continues. There are predators in nature. The same can be said of humans. Brian, I will tell you without false modesty that I am at the top of the food chain. I see what I want and I take it. I'm a predator. I try my best to act like every word he says makes divine sense. In reality, it's disgusting. Ah, ha, ha, he proclaims. We're here. I'm going to drop anchor and disconnect. My scuba gear is in these bags. Get them out and we'll get started, he commands as he dives underwater. It doesn't get any better than this. I grab his short wetsuit and get him ready to dive. By the time he surfaces, everything is ready. I'm still digging through my gear in my large carry-on bag. Looks like you're packed for a week, he says. I just laugh. As I put on my shorts, he notices a peculiar odor. He sniffs the air and a puzzled expression appears on his face. I stand a little farther away, but watch him closely. He shakes his head, as if this is just one of life's little mysteries, and walks down the stainless steel ladder into the sea. Before diving underwater, I tell Banks, it'll be about 15 minutes before I get down to the reef. I need to descend slowly. I explain. He waves his hand as if my situation is of no consequence to him. It does. When Corey used the attractant, he only used half the bottle. I wonder what the reaction would have been if he had used the full bottle. The last step is that I raise the dive ladder to the deck. There was now 3 feet of smooth fiberglass between the ocean and the deck railing. That's a hard thing to get across. I put the shorty on in case he shows up. Now I'm just waiting for the show to start. Nothing happens at first. Did I do something wrong? I wait and watch. After a few minutes, I notice that the surface of the ocean has changed. I notice the dorsal fins. There they are. A moment later, Banks pops up about 20 meters away from me. Shark! He yells and swims frantically towards the boat. I watched him with horrified admiration, feeling no remorse. Strangely enough, he made it to the boat but found that the ladder was missing. Brian, he shouted, get the ladder down, there are sharks in the water. But I thought you were a predator, I said with mocking sincerity. Brian, for God's sake, please help me. And he went underwater. The sea surged with the underwater attack. Clouds of dark red blood were rising from below. That was all I saw of Banks. He floundered some more, and soon the sea calmed down. I waited an hour to launch my small, inflatable boat. I was nervous even doing this considering how many sharks I had seen. I headed towards the beach. Looking at the beautiful sunset, I dozed off for a moment. I shook myself awake and ordered myself to move on. The hardest part was done, but there was more to be done. So far, the plan was working perfectly. Behind the switch, I disconnected the small electric motor and tossed it overboard. It sank like a rock. Then, I put on my backpack, pulled out my knife, and cut the inflatable raft. Because of the tides, you never know where the pieces of this raft will be thrown. I swam toward the shore. The sky was turning dark blue. I came upon a field of or lava. I hid my gear in the back of the field, away from places where it might be found. M Beach was closed on Thursday, so I was doubly protected from possible thieves. I found my stash and changed into my running gear. Putting on my backpack, I cautiously walked over uneven terrain toward the lights of the highway. It was 11 miles in the dark to the Kona Palms Hotel. The first half of the journey was fueled by the adrenaline I'd gotten during the day. The last half gave me a hard time. It had been a long day and gasoline was running low. By the time I got home, it was almost 9 o'clock. In the evening, I just sat in my apartment and thought. Mentally, I was analyzing the past day. I didn't think I would be spotted on Banks's yacht. I was wearing a funny shirt and hat. I kept my head down as we left the harbor. I wiped everything on the yacht that I touched. Finally, I decided that no one had seen me run out onto the highway. It was dark. The events of the day flashed through my mind. Despite the horrific attack and Banks's death, I felt no remorse. I know I could never ever tell anyone about that day. Friday dawned a new day, and at 5 in the morning I was back at work. Just another normal day. The markets were behaving as the more aggressive models predicted. I was slowly selling my positions. I was getting out of the game. I calculated that my trading commissions alone brought me about $40,000. For my LLC, my gross income before taxes was over $700,000. By mid-afternoon, I was a little surprised that I hadn't heard anything about Banks or Hillary. By late afternoon, the news was reporting a missing person and an abandoned boat anchored off the coast near the airport. Friday night, Hillary knocked on the apartment door. All day I'd been contemplating how to prank her. I knew this moment would come. "Hillary," I say in surprise, "what do you want?" My role is the jilted husband. It's actually not that hard to play her. She hugs me with tears in her eyes. "Brian, Banks is missing. They found his boat at sea, but he wasn't on board," she cries. I don't respond to the hug. My arms lie helplessly by my side. I pull away from her and ask what's wrong. "Brian's all over the news," she says. "They found his boat, but there's no sign of Banks." Now she's sobbing. I look at her as if trying to make sense of the situation. I pause and then say, "I'm sure he'll show up. There's nothing to worry about." She looks at me with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, thinking that maybe I was right. I walk over to her and she seems to think I'm going to put my arm around her, put my hand on her back and gently lead her to the door. "I thought you said you were moving out for a week. You have a few more days." I say this without any emotion. She looks at me with a misunderstanding look. "Brian, you're kicking me out of my own home. I need you now more than ever." She stammers. "Looks like you didn't need me while you were having fun with Banks at his apartment," I say. "No more games," I'm furious. "Brian, there's nothing special about sex. Banks says it's just another way of socializing. Our traditional morals are preventing us from finding ourselves. Please don't let a little thing like sex get in the way of our growth together." "Get out," I shout. If I hear that self-actualization crap one more time, I'm going to throw up. As she walks away, she sobs. Sunday morning, Kiki and I have coffee again. I make sure we only look like friends. No hugging, no kissing, no holding hands, nothing. We get along great. We talk about Banks a little, but not much. First of all, I don't want to seem too interested in him. That might seem suspicious. Second, I really don't care. Don't get me wrong. I would love to hug and kiss Kiki. I have a feeling she would love that too. I'd love to just hold her hand, but for a number of reasons I shouldn't rush into it. Back at the apartment, I turn on the news. The first thing I hear is, gruesome find on a popular beach near Kona. Severed arm, possibly from a shark attack, washed ashore. And that's it. On Monday, Hillary tries to call me, but I don't pick up. Then I get another call. It's the police. They say they're investigating the death of Banks Redmond. They come to my apartment and we discuss Thursday, the day Banks left the harbor. The detective mentions that they think I may have been snorkeling with Banks. I deny it. I told them about my inner ear problems and gave them the name of my doctor to check if they wanted to. That was the last I heard from them. I changed the locks on the apartment, but Hillary keeps trying to reach me. Day and night I hear sobbing voicemails and banging on the apartment door. On Friday, I called Gerald Chin and tell him I want her taken to court. I also want a restraining order citing that she is abandoned and adulterous. He asks when. and I tell him Friday night at Kona Palms on Alaya Drive at 7 p.m. The band Pau Hana will be performing there that night. It's a low-key event, having just passed the news of Banks's horrible death. He was not loved. I know this from the Palms community, but he was one of us. The investigation lasted several days, but for lack of other information, it was announced that it was a shark attack. Both Kiki and Hillary attend the event. I sit quietly at a small table with the Platts, Clarence, and Lynn. Hillary approaches me a few times, but my friends avert their eyes. Kiki and I smile and meet eyes a few times, but she knows to stay away for now. Amidst the blooming t-shirts, shorts, bikinis, and two bikinis, a short, dapper Asian man in a suit and tie enters the gathering. The group falls silent for a moment and then resumes their usual conversation. He approaches Hillary and calls her name. I see her nod, and he holds out a 9x11 envelope to her. You have been served. With a slight polite bow, he turns and walks away. There is silence in the Pauhana, and then Hillary is shaken by sobs. Even I get a little uncomfortable. I get up and walk away into the dark depths of the grounds before she notices me. In the distance, I can hear her sobs as she calls my name. I'm already thinking about getting a room at the Royal Kona Hotel for the night, just to avoid her, when suddenly a small hand grabs my arm. It's Kiki. Hi, she says, want some company? I tell her yes, but I'm in no mood to talk. We walk to her house. We talk for a bit, and I ask if I can stay at her place to avoid a confrontation tonight. She said yes, just don't get me wrong, she said. I did. I successfully avoided Hillary all weekend and returned to the 508 on Saturday night. On Sunday, Kiki and I had coffee and had a long, frank, and wonderful conversation. We still hadn't talked about the future, but I think we both knew we had a future together. Finally, I had a conversation with Hillary. She begged and pleaded and cried. I told her it was over. When she finally realized it, she was furious. She got herself a lawyer, and the fight began. Chin hired a staff of investigators and interviewed many people who witnessed Banks molesting Hillary. One resident saw them naked together on Banks's deck. On Friday morning, Clarence visited me. He informed me that Chloe, Banks's widow, would be arriving on Saturday from the mainland, allegedly to put some of Banks's affairs in order. I considered the news and said, "But Hillary will stay there, won't she?" "Yes, dear boy, I know that. She doesn't know about Miss Davenport's coming. I thought you should know so you can prepare accordingly." All week I received calls from Hillary, alternating between anger about the divorce and pleas to leave things alone and stay together. My love for her was gone. I just wanted out. On Saturday morning, I met with Kiki to help me devise a plan to end the relationship. At first, she didn't want to agree to some of the details, but then she agreed. I wasn't around when Chloe arrived at her and Banks's apartment, now occupied by my soon-to-be ex-wife Hillary. But from several accounts, that's exactly what happened. Chloe arrives at the apartment and quickly realizes that someone was there. Obviously not Banks. At this point, Hillary was just taking a bubble bath. Chloe walks in and knocks the spirit out of her. Chloe demanded to know what the hell Hillary was doing in her apartment. She didn't care about Banks, his latest girlfriends, or who he was having fun with. "Why are you here?" Chloe yelled at Hillary. Hillary stood up and covered herself with a towel, soap bubbles sliding down her body. "Oh, Chloe," exclaimed Hillary, "isn't it awful to be Banks?" With sadness and pleading in her eyes, she asked. "No," replied Chloe. "It's not horrible at all. In fact, all those sharks have saved me millions. I was just about to divorce that jerk." Hillary gave Chloe a blank stare. How could she say that about her brilliant mentor? "Right, now get out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing," Chloe tells her. Chloe stops her as she, dejected, heads into the bedroom to get dressed. "Out!" she shouts. But my clothes," Hillary wails. "Out," she orders, "and give me back my towel." Now, Hillary is naked in the street. Kind Lynn and Clarence rescue her and give her some clothes before she undresses even more. Apparently, one of the residents peeked. An hour later, she shows up at my door. "Brian," she says, "I know lawyers fight, but you're my husband. Can't we at least talk?" She asks. "Sit down." I let her into the house and she sits down on the couch and I sit in the only chair. "I miss you and I still don't understand why you're so mad at me," she says. Hillary, you slept with Banks. You gave him your body, and worst of all, you acted like it didn't matter. I tell her. Brian, why are you so hung up on the sexual component of my healing and self-realization? I was doing this for us, she tells me. Are you telling me that having sex with Banks must have had something to do with our relationship? Brian, forget about the sex with Banks. You and I are meant to be together. I'm committed to you. Banks helped me realize that you are truly my life partner. From now on, every moment of every day, it's my job to make you happy. What more could I want? She says this with sincere conviction, looking me straight in the eye. At that moment, Kiki comes out of the bedroom. Hillary looks at him with a shocked expression on her face. Oops, Kiki says, making no move to cover herself. A small smile plays on her face. You, shouts Hillary. What are you doing here? Well, you know how outdated morals can limit people, Kiki says with an honest face. Anyway, sorry for interrupting, she says as she walks back into the bedroom. Brian, once she's gone, could you come back and expand my horizons again? She looks at Hillary intently, arching her eyebrows. I'm sorry, Hillary, I say. I need to go back and work on becoming the best version of myself. Hillary runs out of the apartment sobbing. Everyone needs to realize one thing. The closest thing I had with Kiki was a couple of light kisses. She reluctantly agreed to help. All she had to do was walk out of the bedroom in her robe. She improvised the rest. I'm not complaining. When I walk into the bedroom, she is already dressed. She sees the disappointment on my face and laughs. You look like someone took away your favorite toys. She says this with a beautiful smile. A few months later, Hillary and I divorced. She had long since moved to the mainland. In the divorce agreement, we divided the bank accounts. I never reveal my secret account. I'm buying out her share of the condominium. I'm not leaving. Kiki practically lives with me. I never talk about banks, shark baiting, or even scuba diving. Not even with Corey. He and I have become good friends. I catch a glimpse of him from time to time. I have a feeling he has a clue what happened. Life in paradise is beautiful. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.